For any big executive running one of the world's most successful companies, bringing electric cars to the masses would be hard work enough. Never mind also owning a space company with a plan to land a man on Mars. But Elon Musk loves a challenge. So last night, the world's richest man said he was adding Twitter to his day job in a $44 billion acquisition that lands him, in his words, the world's digital town square.
This is a social upheaval.
One of the biggest acquisitions in technology history.
The reaction was immediate. Even though it was expected, the news got Twitter investors all giddy, its shares rising on news of the deal, which valued the company 40% above where it was trading before the billionaire Mr. Musk bought his initial stake. In a statement on Twitter, of course, Mr. Musk said free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. Twitter has tremendous potential. I look forward to working with the company and the community of users to unlock it.
Twitter has become kind of the de facto town square.
He didn't speak publicly yesterday, but previously Mr. Musk has heaped praise on the social media platform, where he has more than 85 million followers, and with it, huge influence.
Well, I think it's very important for there to be an inclusive arena for free speech. It's really important that people have both the reality and the perception that they are able to speak freely within the bounds of the law.
Twitter may not have the same number of users or profits as some of the other big social media companies like Facebook, but it undoubtedly has an outsized influence among celebrities, journalists and politicians, no more so than right here in Washington, D.C., where one Donald J. Trump was banned from his favorite platform for allegedly inciting the January the 6th riot. The big question now is, with Elon Musk on board, he an advocate of free speech, will the former president be allowed back on?
I have to do is take a look at the poll. You know what? That's
Donald
changing.
Trump said he won't rejoin Twitter, but he, just like Elon Musk, is a mercurial fellow, and many believe he could just as easily change his mind, especially with the midterm elections fast approaching. Does this mean that Donald Trump inevitably comes back? And what does that mean for the midterms?
Predicting Donald Trump, not my responsibility and probably beyond my expertise.
Of course, this is bigger than Trump. Mr. Musk's plan to buy Twitter is worrying this influential member of the Senate committee that oversees the tech giants. But he says that he's going to let free speech reign. That's his plan. That's why he wants it.
Free speech and the First Amendment are tremendously important values, but there are also responsibilities that come with freedoms.
But if it's a private company, can't he do what he wants? Isn't that exactly what he plans to do?
Private companies have restrictions all the time in our law. We don't let them do whatever they want when they harm individuals' health and safety.
That was the warning coming from Europe today too, that in a world of rampant online disinformation and hate speech, much of it on Twitter, Mr. Musk must abide by the rules. In a tweet, Thierry Breton, the European Commissioner for the Internal Market, said, "Be it cars or social media, any company operating in Europe needs to comply with our rules, regardless of their shareholding. Mr. Musk knows this well." So just how did we get here? In early April, Elon Musk revealed he'd quietly amassed a 9.2% stake in Twitter. The next day, the company's chief executive invited Mr. Musk on the board. He duly accepted, but 5 days later, he did an about-face and declined the board seat, paving the way for his next move, an offer to buy the whole company, which initially made Twitter's bosses panic. But after assuring them he had the money, yesterday Twitter agreed. He's promising a Twitter edit button, says he'll get rid of spam bots and, of course, allow freedom of speech. It could lead to profound change. Just 280 characters allowed, but the humble tweet spawned revolutions, insurrections and culture wars. Will Elon Musk make it better or worse?
Well, joining me now is Jesse Lerick, founder of Accountable Tech and former spokesperson for Hillary Clinton, and Katie Harbath from the Washington think tank, the Bipartisan Policy Center. She's a former public policy director at Facebook and has also worked for the Republican Party. Katie, first of all, I mean, the right are jumping up and down with glee, saying, you know, it's the end of Twitter's sort of left-wing bias and sort of assault on free speech. Are they celebrating too soon?
I think they are. I think that it would be way too premature to assume that Musk is going to do everything that the right wants them to, particularly once he starts to realize how tough some of these decisions are and some of the impossible trade-offs that he's going to have to think about when it comes to content moderation. I think, too, you're also hearing that some on the right are not excited about the prospect of Donald Trump coming back on the platform. So it's definitely much more mixed reviews. They've
also got to abide by laws, haven't they? And laws are cracking down on content moderation around the world.
They are, and they're in some ways, like in Europe, you're seeing, you know, there's going to be massive regulation that's likely to pass this year. But in other places around the world, these laws are actually veiled attempts at actually trying to suppress speech. And so following the law may actually cause less speech to happen rather than more. And so these are some of the challenges that Musk is walking himself into.
Jesse Lerick, I mean, his promises to make Twitter more open, to make the algorithms you know, open source and the whole thing more accountable, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a good thing if he was serious about it and if he had thought through it for more than a few minutes and actually had like real plans to figure out what's the responsible way to make our algorithms more transparent, what's the right way to share this information without letting bad actors take advantage of it. You know, I think more openness, more transparency, more accountability for these platforms is great. But I just don't have a lot of confidence that Elon has spent more than a few minutes thinking about any of this.
Why? I mean, he's the richest man in the world. He's a huge success. I mean, he's not going to spend $44 billion without thinking about it for more than a few minutes.
I mean, I've listened pretty carefully to the kinds of comments that he's made about free speech and his free speech absolutism. And I think Katie is exactly right that, I mean, and she lived it firsthand. You know, content moderation is hard. There's trade-offs. There's different dynamics in every country, and you're operating a global platform. And the casualness with which he talks about this stuff, you know, it sounds more like a little kid that happens to have the most money of anyone in the world than someone who's thought long and hard about how they're going to moderate a global platform.
It does make us think, though, doesn't it, about how Twitter is perceived, and the fact that the right do seem to be sort of celebrating to a large degree tells you how Twitter is perceived. You know, is Twitter, you know, a left-wing echo chamber?
I don't think so. I mean, I think again, you can ask Katie what her experience was like, but I can tell you from watching it firsthand that the left is always mad at the platforms for having right-wing bias, and the right is always mad at the platforms for having left-wing bias. At the end of the day, you know, I don't think that this is necessarily about left or right, but about you know, what freedom of speech actually means. And I think, you know, to a certain extent, if you don't have content moderation and you don't, you know, and you allow the loudest and most toxic voices on the platform to be amplified and to take over the platform and to target hate and harassment towards marginalized voices, you're actually serving to silence other people. And so, you know, I'll let Katie speak to the left or right-wing bias of various platforms, but I think that I don't think Elon has a very sophisticated understanding of freedom of expression.
Well, Katie, I mean, it's not just about left and right, is it? It's about truth and lies. You know, and how you allow that. You know, where are the limits of what you should and shouldn't allow if the lies are around the world before the truth has got its trousers on?
There's also the question of not just what you do or do not allow, but what the penalty is for what you are saying around that. And should it be things like as strict as deplatforming, or should it be more like a reduction of reach? These are the sort of, you know, nuanced decisions of thinking about these things. You also have to look at behavior. It's not just what people say, but it's how they do it. Are they spamming it in a lot of different comments? Are they doing, you know, Musk says he's going to get rid of bots, but there's also some good ways that bots are used, but there's also some bad ways that bots are used as well. And what if real people are acting like a bot? Like, these are the types of things that like Jesse said, we just haven't heard Musk get into the nuance of how he thinks about that.
I mean, you know, when he says he's going to get rid of bots? I mean, he talks about making everybody, identify themselves effectively. I mean, is that the answer to getting rid of bots?
I think that what Musk fails to realize is that there's really no finish line in this work. Adversarial actors will continue to find different ways of trying to exploit these platforms. They can continue to close holes, but they continue to get more sophisticated. The platforms continue to get more sophisticated. And so there is no silver bullet in this. If there was, these platforms would have done it a very long time ago. Some of these things may make it better. I mean, we kind of have to wait and see. But, even anonymous speech has some very beneficial things for people who might otherwise be in harm's way for some of the things they're saying around the world. And that's why this is also tricky.
Jesse, I mean, just finally, I mean, a few days ago, Elon Musk asked, is Twitter dying? Do you think he might just kill it?
I don't think he'll kill it intentionally. It remains to be seen what he might do to it unintentionally. But I really just don't think
I mean by accident. I don't mean he'll just throw away his money, but I mean, could he end up with a dead social media network?
I think it'll take some time even if that is the ultimate fate of Twitter. I mean, it is one of the most dominant and influential platforms in the world right now. And we've seen a lot of efforts to, especially on the right, to start, alternative social media platforms and try to challenge some of the incumbent dominant players. And they've kind of fizzled. And so we'll see what happens. I think ultimately, if you really were to take that much of a hands-off approach and not moderate content, not enforce rules against bad actors, ultimately over time, I just think that that's not a good way to maintain users. Okay. But we'll see.
We will see. Thank you very much indeed, both Jesse Lerick and Katie Harbath.